Hey guys, it's Coach Matt with Lifelong Recovery. In this video, I'm going to talk about anger. The ironic thing is, this is probably my sixth or seventh take, and I was like, fucking shit. So obviously it's something that I need to work on as well. I've struggled with it for a long time. Some days I'm better at it than others, but definitely have a long way to go. And it's something that I'm working on a regular basis, and I help other people work on it too. The reason why it's such a big deal is it can be really detrimental to your mental well-being and your mental health overall. If you've been struggling with addiction, it can lead to a relapse. So it can be quite toxic. So I want to put that caveat out there that it can be quite toxic. The reason I say that is it's not always a terrible thing. I have met people that actually I feel when working with them, doing life coaching and recovery coaching, that they actually needed more anger. And the reason that I say that is because they should have been upset and they should have gotten angry and think of what other people were doing. So the reason I throw that out there is it is natural, right? It's a natural feeling to have at times. What we don't want is it to consume our entire lives and to lead us to making bad decisions, to destroy our mental health, things like that. Telling that story about how sometimes I actually believe people needed more anger and to feel the anger about certain situations is because you don't want to be a doormat, right? So sometimes it can serve a purpose. It reminds me of something that I saw on Reddit. Someone said their philosophy is do no harm, take no shit. And I really think that's a really wise philosophy, honestly. You stand your ground, right? You have a frame, right? You don't allow people to walk on you. You don't allow people to disrespect you, but you also are very mindful of how you're treating other people and how you're going about your daily life, right? So it's a good mantra to have. Do no harm, take no shit, okay? But if you find yourself really struggling with anger, you feel like it's a destructive force in your life, there's some good reasons for that. So the first thing I want to talk about is anger definitely can be toxic. Holding on to resentments, having a lot of anger, it can influence your relationships, it can cause relapse, it can cause self-harm, this, that, and the other. So it can be a very destructive force. There's a good quote that I think captures this potential toxicity of anger and resentment from Buddha. So Buddha said, holding on to a resentment is like holding on to a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at somebody else. You're the one getting burned. Right? So it's like the anger is supposed to be directed towards the other person. And this can be really difficult if it's justified anger, right? However, it's destructive to your mental well-being, your mental health overall, can lead to relapse, self-harm, these kinds of things. So a little kind of story about this. For the average person, probably anger, as long as it's not something that is coming up super often, is not that big of a deal necessarily. Many people are able to self-soothe, to get over it. So even if they're feeling anger, they can move on naturally. Well, if you struggled with mental health issues and personality disorders, struggled with addiction, these kinds of things, well, anger can be much more destructive for you than for the average person. And what got me thinking about this is I was working with a client today who's super cool guy. I really like him, really nice guy, good guy, but he's had significant struggles with his mental health and with self-harm in particular. So what this guy would do is he would cut himself and also hit himself in the head. So what he was talking about today, we were talking about anger. So that's why I wanted to do this video. He was talking about how he knows that he should be giving people the benefit of the doubt, seeing both sides of issues. So a big thing for this guy is like, when he would disagree with someone, he has a certain opinion about whatever, and somebody else has a differing opinion, and it just could cause anger, especially when we were talking about politics and things like that. So something interesting I thought that he said is, why should I work on it when no one else does? Which is a good point. It's a valid point. The majority of people probably don't work on this. They probably see things their way. They're probably not trying to see things from other people's different points of view. It depends, right? But if I'm an angry person and I'm very opinionated, then I may spark that anger and that passionate feeling about whatever it is with the other person as well, right? So we were talking about this, and I said, well, here's the thing. It's the same thing for me as a recovering alcoholic and addict, right? I have to be very careful about anger. And again, guys, this is something that has been a significant struggle in my life. You can ask my wife about it. I have to really watch this because it's funny because people always tell me, oh, you seem like such a mild-mannered person. And then sometimes they've seen me get angry and just kind of blow up, and they're like, whoa, where did that come from? And a big part of this is, for me, it was tied to people pleasing. So what I would do is I would allow people to take advantage of me or walk all over me, and then I would just kind of stuff it down, and then it would explode. And I can think of a couple incidents at work where people saw me explode and they were like, where the fuck did that come from? Because they thought of me as just a very calm person. When I was working in a treatment center, people would always say that to me, you just got such a calm demeanor and everything. I'm like, if you only fucking knew, right? But anyway, so for me, it was really tied to people pleasing. So I had to really work on that I can't be a doormat. I need to stand up for myself. I need to set boundaries and make sure that people are respecting those boundaries, and tell them if they're not respecting my boundary, I need to voice that to them, right? So for me, this was a hard thing to do because I don't like confrontation. Like I said, the people pleasing. So that's something that I've had to work on and still need to work on it. But so that could be something to look at. That may be something to think about too. Does that ring true for you as well? Do you struggle with people pleasing? It's funny, you're talking about this, it makes me think of how I had a conversation with a few friends of mine that are in recovery, and we were talking about these kinds of things, people pleasing, and I was saying there's a difference between being nice and kind, right? Being nice comes from this, a lot of times it can come from this manipulative energy where you want people to like you, right? You want people to approve of you, you want validation, these kinds of things. Whereas being kind is just doing the right thing, helping people, that kind of thing. And it was funny, my friend told me a story about, he heard the difference between being nice and being kind. He said a lot of times Southern people will be nice, so they see you on the side of the road with a flat tire, they may like drive by and be like, oh, bless your heart. Whereas a person from the Northeast, they may be kind, where they may not be nice. So if they see you struggling changing a tire, they may be like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Let me help you do this so you do it right, so you don't screw it all up. So it's not necessarily nice, right? But it's kind because they're helping you out. So the Southern person is nice because they're like, oh, you poor thing, but they're not helping you, right? So this is a difference between that energy, or can be the difference. So that, guys, that is my experience with that is common. People pleasers will typically bottle up things and then it explodes, right? And then people are like, where is this coming from? What the hell happened, right? So a good way to counteract that is to work on your boundaries, make sure you're respecting yourself, and make sure you demand that other people respect you as well, and work on healthy confrontation, speaking up for yourself, telling people when something has crossed a boundary or whatever, just not allowing things to happen because you don't want to ruffle feathers or you don't want to upset them or things like that, right? So that's one thing. I'm sorry, guys, I got way off track here. So the reason that I said that, the client that I was working with, why should I work on it when no one else does? Well, the thing is if I struggle with mental health, if I struggle with self-harm, if you're a recovering alcoholic or addict like I am, well, then anger can be much more detrimental to you than it is to the average person, right? So that's why I told my client, I was like, well, look, man, you don't have to work on it. You don't have to try and be more open-minded and see where other people are coming from, and just kind of be more kind and think more subjectively instead of getting angry about what they're saying and disagreeing with them and stuff like that. But it's hurting you, and you could, so he's working on self-harm, right? So he's been doing good with that. So if he allows himself to get too angry, he could relapse, right? So he could do the self-harm again. Same thing with addiction, right? If I am trying to stay clean and sober, well, I better make sure that I'm working on this anger, because the more peace of mind that I have, the more likely I am to stay clean and sober, right? And it talks about this in the AA book, how it says that something along the lines of normal people have the dubious luxury of anger and resentment, but as recovering alcoholics, we don't have that luxury. We have to be much more careful about it because it can lead to relapse, and relapse can lead to death for us. So another couple things I want to touch on. Anger is an interesting thing, and I think it's common. There's a lot of other things that are like this where it can have an intoxicating effect, especially when it comes to self-righteous anger. So if I'm angry at someone because I believe that I am smarter than them, I believe that I don't know, a better person than them, it could be a whole host of different things, but basically it's allowing me to put myself on a higher level than another person, right? Well, this person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, they're a fucking idiot, they don't understand, whatever. It's funny because that same client, we were talking about going on the internet and social media, whatever, and arguing with people, and it's like, what the fuck is the point of that, right? What, these people you've never met in your life, and right, there's a reason they call it trolling, because if you imagine these, my client was talking about these trolls living in their mom's basement that are just not taking care of themselves, and it makes me think of an episode in South Park with Cartman, where he's just playing video games in the basement, and he's like going to the bathroom in a 2-liter bottle and everything, and anyway, but it's what a miserable life, right? Or maybe they're not even miserable themselves, but they thrive off of making other people miserable. They want people to engage in those arguments and argue with them, and it makes them feel superior, or they just want to stir shit up. So the word trolling is kind of funny when you think about where it probably came from. But again, that's what can be this intoxicating effect, is it can make me feel smarter or better or whatever, more informed. A lot of times I think it has to do with intelligence. So people who view themselves as very intelligent people who are up on current events and subject things like this, they can have a lot of that self-righteous anger. And it can be, again, it can be very intoxicating because it boosts your ego, right? Another thing I want to talk about, anger a lot of times stems from trauma, right? So there's all sorts of, working in the mental health field, we talk about trauma with a big T and trauma with a little t. So trauma with a big T is these significant traumatic events, right? That abuse, neglect, maybe tragic accidents, things like that. So that's trauma with a big T, where it's like a very powerful, significant event, right? And then trauma with a little t is more subtle, right? It could be a parent just not giving you the love that you deserve, not making you feel measure up, things like that. So it can be, but either one is important, right? It's important to deal with. One of the things that I struggled with a lot growing up, and then like struggling with addiction, and then trying to get clean and sober, well, I was like, well, I had a great childhood. My parents were married, and they stayed married until my dad passed away, and I had everything I needed and stuff like that. But it's like, but that doesn't, trauma is very subjective, if that makes sense. So the way that I interpret things, right? Now, I may have had a better childhood than a lot of people out there, but there's still things that happened. Nobody's perfect, right? No parent is perfect, right? And a lot of parents, you probably could just use some help or some skills in parenting, right? That's very common. Again, no parent's perfect, but there's just varying levels and different things that's going on in the household and marriage and stuff like that. It can create that trauma with a little t. So a big thing is like, respect it, right? I had to learn to respect my trauma, that even though I didn't have this horrible childhood, right? There were still things that could have been better. There was, as a result of my substance use, I had a lot of traumatic things happen to me. So bottom line, respect the trauma and understand that it could be creating things that you need to deal with. So outbursts of anger, a lot of times this can come from trauma. I have had and have a lot of self-directed anger, which you could say, well, what's the problem with that? As long as I'm not directing it towards other people, right? Well, that's good, right? It's probably better, relatively, it's better maybe to direct it towards yourself. However, it's not good, right? It's still not good. We should be treating ourselves with respect and kindness just like we would anybody else, right? We should be treating ourselves the same way that we expect other people to treat us, the same way that we try and treat other people, right? So even self-directed anger, it can be extremely detrimental. And the other thing with that too is that even if my anger is directed at myself, so I'll give you guys an example. So I grew up just kind of feeling like inferior compared to my sister. My sister was very smart and got good grades, and I think I had ADHD, and I just had some learning issues, I would say. So I grew up feeling very inferior compared to my sister, right? So I had a lot of self-directed anger. I would, Even from a young age, I would beat the shit out of myself. And then when I started getting into substance use and and couldn't quit, it was like I just started beating the shit out of myself on a regular basis, right? Telling myself I was a piece of shit. And I see that to this day. I've been clean and sober 16 years, but that self-directed anger, that those feelings of inferiority and things like that, and like literally getting mad at myself because I feel like I'm a fucking idiot, or all these negative self-talk, right? Piece of shit, I'm an idiot, these kinds of things. Don't get me wrong, it is so much better today than it was, right? But it's something I still have to work on. And one of the ways that I get reminded of, hey, I need to be working on this more, is when I find myself getting mad. So my fucking thing is I love to get mad at inanimate objects. Sounds pretty fucking stupid probably to people that don't do this. If you do this, you understand, right? I will get mad at things, right? Because they're not doing what I want them to do. I get easily frustrated, easily annoyed, things like that. So that's something that I have to consistently be working on. And like I said, you may not seem like a big deal. Well, I'll tell you guys, when I was single, living alone, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Maybe my neighbors would get pissed off when they heard me scream fuck for no reason, right? But it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't affecting, I don't want to say it wasn't affecting anything or anyone, but you didn't have an immediate effect necessarily. It did when I got married, right? Now I'm married, living with my wife, and it's like, well, I lived alone for a long time, for 20 years, right? And so I was used to that. And then when my wife and I got married, of course, we started living together, and it's like, well, now she sees the little things that will cause anger in me. And it's not fun for her, you know what I mean? She doesn't like me to be, even if I'm not angry at her, a lot of times it bleeds over into, I'm in a pissy mood, I'm in a bad mood, so then I'm more easily annoyed at her, you know what I mean, for something that I shouldn't be, or whatever. You could be with different people, my family, friends, whatever, but of course with your significant other, that's probably where it's going to come out the most. But that's something that I'm working on a regular basis. I need to work on it more, but luckily I feel like it hasn't been as destructive force in my life over the past 16 years that I've been in recovery as it once was. When I was still in my addiction, obviously I would get angry while I was going to go drink or use. If I was trying to not do it, it was a perfect excuse for me to go drink or use. So again, it can be depending on what you're dealing with, even if it's not substances, but it's maybe negative self-talk. It's detrimental to your relationships, your friends, your family, your significant other. If you do self-harm or you make bad or negative decisions, can create a lot of self-sabotage. A lot of these things are connected in ways that people don't realize. All play a part, and it's, unless you're very well versed in mental health or you've been going to therapy for a long time or stuff like that, you're probably not going to see the connections. There is a lot of connections with this. So things to do, right? What can I do? How do I overcome this? If I'm someone that struggles with anger, guys, you might not like this. If you struggle with anger, a lot of people like the anger. They like the way that it makes them feel, right? Especially if we're talking about the self-righteous anger. They don't want to give it up because it feels justified. But the problem is, going back to that quote from Buddha, is that you're the one that is hurting, right? I'm angry at so-and-so, but I'm the one who, they're living rent-free in my head, right? When you talk about trauma, I'm not a believer that you necessarily have to forgive everybody, right? I think some acts are so horrendous, it may not be possible for everybody to forgive, right? Honestly, if you've had something really significant happen to you and someone's told you, oh, you need to forgive them, you need to let it go, that can just make it kind of worse, right? Each his own. If forgiveness is very important to you, if it's something you can do, by all means, it's wonderful if you can. However, not everybody's in a position to forgive everybody in their lives, and I don't think that is a necessary thing to get over anger. What I do think is important is lessening the impact, working on not letting it rule your life, right? So how can I just set this aside? It may be something you're never going to forget about, right? You're never going to forgive necessarily, could be, right? But how do I set it aside and move on with my life? How do I make it have a less of an impact, right? And just a way to do that, acceptance. I can't go back and change anything. I can't redo this. There may be nothing I can do except working on not letting it affect my life, right? So this acceptance is key. It doesn't mean you have to, it doesn't mean you feel like it's justified or that it's okay or anything like that, right? It's just coming to terms with, like, I can't go back and change it. I can't take it back. And so I need to just work on living my life and lessening the impact, right? But so that's one thing. Acceptance is huge. Another thing that I was talking about with my client today, trying to be more subjective with other people and objective for yourself. I think there was a philosopher, I think Kierkegaard or someone said, you talked about this. That's like a key to life, is be objective with yourself. So you look at your own actions objectively. Don't excuse your actions, right? Look at it objectively, but try and be more subjective with other people. So an example of that is, I work on myself. I try and do better every day, be a good person, show kindness to people, show understanding to people, that kind of thing. And then when people are not doing that to me, it's not that I let them disrespect me, right? But I don't let it affect me, right? So maybe I take a more subjective approach of, like, trying to understand. This is a huge thing. Trying to understand where somebody else is coming from. If they disagree with you, you can just be like, they're a fucking idiot, fuck them, right? That's not helping anything. Maybe taking some time to look at, why are they thinking the way that they are, right? Why do they have this viewpoint? Why do they act the way they do? Again, you're not excusing it. Do no harm, take no shit, right? You're still maintaining your boundaries, but you're not letting it affect you as much, right? You're able to let it go. You maybe can understand. It's like the whole bullying thing, right? A lot of bullies, the reason they bully is probably they were bullied themselves, or maybe they were abused at home, or, again, you're not accepting, when I say you're not accepting, you're not saying that it's okay, but you're just trying to understand why people are the way that they are. That's a huge thing for helping your mental health. Guys, what this comes down to is you want to have peace of mind, right? So your reactions matter. The other person may not be right, but we're trying to focus on ourselves, trying to be good people, do right things, do the right thing when nobody's looking, that kind of thing, and just be good with ourselves, right? And let these kinds of things roll off our back more. Of course, typical things, you probably heard them a million times. Going for a walk, getting out in nature, breathing exercises, meditation, changing your environment, calling somebody and talking to them. All these things can be helpful when you're dealing with anger. But the biggest thing is having the awareness, right? I need to not get as upset as I am. It's not worth it. We're talking about mental health mostly, right? But this is physical too. This affects your physical health, right? Stress is, they call it the silent killer. Is your blood pressure, right? Stroke, heart attack, probably cancer from stress. Stress is a big factor in our physical health. So we're helping our mental health and we're helping our physical health. Guys, please comment if you have ways that you like to deal with your anger, calm yourself down. If you have questions, please let me know. I appreciate it. If this video helped you at all, please give it a like, share it with somebody. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.